He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 29 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Henry, we have a strategist from North Carolina with us today who has an amazing offering that I think we both agree is an incredibly valuable tool. Let's have him, Dan Carlton, tell us all about it. All right, Henry, we are back with another episode of the Brief Brothers. Today, all the way from North Carolina, we have Dan Carlton, who is the founder and grand poobah and in chief of an independent concern called the Paragraph Project. It is a combination of, you know what, I'm going to let you tell us, Dan. But first, let me just say, we've got a lot of great stuff to talk about, but welcome to the Brief Brothers. Henry and I are delighted to have you.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah. So I started, just a little bit of background on me. I started as an account planner. Yeah, at Fallon in Minneapolis, and then spent some years at McKinney in Durham, North Carolina. And then I left about 20 years ago to start the Paragraph Project. And we're a hybrid market research brand strategy firm, and we do work for all different types of clients across different categories. But it's really allowed me to focus on the strategic development process. I still love being a part of creative brief writing and working with creatives to bring ideas to life. But the sole focus of what we do at Paragraph is really try to understand consumers, gather insights, and turn that into strategies that can move brands forward. So it's been a lot of fun over the past 20 years, and learned a lot through a lot of mistakes, but it's been a great experience.
That's not going to do for background. We're going to need a little more.
Yeah, we're gonna. I want to back up even further.
We want to know like how you got into the crazy business of advertising to begin with, and take us a little bit through what we find is there's a lot of similarities in people's stories, but it's always good to kind of hear what they have to say, how they got into it, what the step get to their current location.
Yeah, so how I got into this crazy business. My dad was in advertising, and his dad was in advertising. So I grew up in a house that had Ad Age and Ad Weeks like scattered all over the living room coffee table. And so I don't know if it was in my DNA or if I was just brainwashed along the way, but I kind of always knew that I wanted to be in advertising.
We've had
Probably a little both.
We've had a couple of those, like Cameron Day, famously son of Guy Day. So that's cool. That means you're one of the very few people who grew up knowing about how the business works and things like that. Can lions exist and stuff like that?
Yep. Yeah, and it was interesting when I was growing up and starting, I was in high school and college and trying to think about what I wanted to do within the ad agency world. And this is just when account planning started to take hold in the US with, Goodby and Chiat, and Fallon was, one of the early shops in the US that really embraced planning. And I was fortunate, my dad kind of pointed me in that direction. And he just saw a lot of opportunity and a lot of value that sort of discipline.
What role did he have?
He was an account guy. So he was started off early in his career. He was in media, but was an account guy pretty much the bulk of his.
And he didn't brainwash you on working with those damn creatives?
I don't know. Like I like I like to think that strategy is a creative discipline in a way. I felt like it's a nice blend of kind of analytical thinking with creative thinking, and I don't know. I just felt like my mind worked better that way than just being a copywriter, for instance.
I completely agree with you. I've encountered one or two people directly, maybe there's many others out there, who simply look at strategists as, one step above bean counters. They don't see anything creative about strategy. I don't get the way they think that way. We've had strategists who've been our guests who are very creative. And, I think I sing Henry's praises all the time to the point of embarrassing him, because I think he's truly a creative guy. We talk about how important writing is. So that just baffles me that, some people don't see that connection between strategy.
I think it's based on their personal experiences and how, as we never tire of saying, there's a bell curve for everything, and there's good strategists and there's bad strategists and there's a lot in between. So if you've had bad experiences with strategists, you're not going to have a very high regard for them, I would imagine.
Yeah. It works the other way too. I think some of the best strategists I've worked with are actually creatives, and I've
100%.
A lot of my successes have been stealing ideas from creatives in meetings. I'm like, I'll take that idea and drop it.
If you look at the pioneers of the creative revolution, the Bill Burnbachs of the world, the David Ogilvies, they weren't just writers. They weren't just creative people. They were business people. They understood business. They understood business strategy. And this was before we had the vocabulary of modern advertising strategy or planning, as it was called at the beginning. But it definitely existed. That thought process was happening inside agencies. It was just, it might be housed with an account person, or it might be housed with a media person or a research person. But it definitely existed. It was just the codifying of that into a role that was specific to planning was the kind of the new thing, and creating its own entity.
Yep.
So the thing that drew my attention to you, Dan, is a fascinating offering. I'm guessing it's fairly new for you, that it just made me scratch my head. It was kind of a reality challenger, but also a reality check for me. You will have a webinar. I'm going to guess it's like an hour-long webinar for strategists who are saddled with the task of writing a brief in one day. So you've called this the 8-hour creative brief, if I've got that right.
Yep.
That just, I mean, we all have faced this challenge of how much time do we have? How much time are we given to write a brief? And that time seems to diminish with every turning week or month. When did you realize that this was something that was serious? And tell us, how did this evolve? And are you getting a reply? Are people signing up for it? Tell us about this.
Yeah, so it was about like 4 or 5 years ago, I was seeing more and more this rush to get a creative brief out the door. It's always, strategists have always bemoaned the fact that there's not enough time to write a good creative brief. So that's always been true. But I feel like 4 or 5 years ago, kind of on maybe as a result of social media, or just like new technology and tools developing to the point where content just has to be churned out faster and faster. So the time strategists have to write a brief has been getting condensed. So I was wondering, I'm like, how is this like a universal phenomenon, or is this just something that I'm kind of seeing with my own clients? And I put a simple poll on LinkedIn, just asking other strategists, like, what's the shortest amount of time you've had to write a creative brief? And 93% of strategists have said a day or less. And some of the comments, if you just look at the comments on that post, it's crazy how much of like a kind of a gut level frustration was just like boiling up among strategists who were like, it's crazy. Like I might get given an assignment at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and have to have a brief done by the end of the day. And it's just a reality that is something that strategists have to deal with.
That was how I spent last Friday.
Yes. Yeah.
Woke up in the morning, there was no brief on my horizon, and within the first hour of work, there was a brief on my horizon, and it had to be done by end of day. So
yeah. And I had like a little multiple choice sort of options. And I remember one person vividly, they said, is there like a negative time as one of the options? Because I've had to write briefs after creative ideas were already developed. It's kind of upside down sometimes, like how the process has been really kind of compressed. And
so there's an underlying conceit though, right? Which is that not every brief is the same, right? If you need to do a tactical brief for a client you have a lot of experience on, and that is something you can knock out pretty quick because you have all the information. You already kind of have your thoughts formulated on the client situation. Like that's one thing. Another thing is a new business pitch, maybe where you don't have any information. You have to learn about the category, you have to learn about the consumers, you got to learn about the brand, and so that's a different thing. But there's also time pressure there because typically in a pitch, you need to get that brief in front of the creatives right away in order to give them the maximum amount of time to ideate, and then at some point that brief is going to get retooled as the work starts coming out, to your point about like retrofitting a brief to stuff that's been done. So there's more than one way to slice the apple here, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as I was developing this 8-hour creative brief writing process, like I was keeping new business pitches in mind because I feel like that's kind of the perfect storm where it's like you don't have time and you probably don't have a lot of kind of foundational information yet. So you really are kind of starting from scratch. And I'm like, is there a way to provide strategists some tools and some guidance, like in regards to like how to make the most of what little time you have to write a creative brief? So that was really my focus. And I was just looking at like, in an ideal scenario, you might have 2 weeks, right? What are some like the key activities that go on over the course of those 2 weeks? What are the key milestones? And how do those all feed into the brief? And like, can you take some of those elements and condense them and put them together in a more, expedited time frame? So that was what I was thinking about in terms of responding to that.
So when I read a little bit about this on your, I think it was either a LinkedIn profile or a post that you had, maybe it was both, you have essentially have a training that instructs brief writers what to do in hour 1, what to do in hour 2, what to do in hour 3, and so on to fill you've got 8 hours. Here's how to break it down. Here's how to prevent yourself from going crazy. What has been the response to this training?
It's been great. I feel like what I really tried to do was like I don't want to put too many constraints on people, but I think there is this kind of false dichotomy where people feel like if you put too much of a process in place, you're going to get poor quality on the back end, or you're not going to be able to be creative or come up with new thinking. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I wanted to figure out like, okay, let's start with a very kind of rigid process just to get through, like you're saying, Howard, like hour 1, hour 2, hour 3. People can kind of deviate if they need to. But I think people have actually enjoyed that rigidity more than I thought they would, because there's very specific tools and frameworks every step along the way. So there's no guesswork. You have like a base plan to work with. So anyone can kind of pick it up and have a game plan for how to use that day that they might have to write a brief.
So I would suspect that the person who is intrigued by it and signs up for your webinar is a thoughtful person. You're not going to do this, right? Unless you're a thoughtful person. And to me, it's not about the amount of time you spend on the brief or the amount of time you spend on the component parts of the brief. It's, are you being thoughtful about this assignment? And that's not to discount the value of what you're offering, which is, this is how you avoid getting stuck in one part of the brief development, keep yourself on track, do things, move through your thought process just quicker. But at the end, the brief isn't going to be dictated. In other words, what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to give credence to your argument, which is having a rigid process isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. It can be a very good thing if the person that's using it is very thoughtful. You're going to get a thoughtful brief. You're just going to get it in a quicker amount of time.
Yeah, it's like strategists that are not thoughtful are not, they're just going to fill out a brief.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna bang it out, and they're not gonna put as much care into the craft of brief writing.
And the creatives will know that.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? Like that bell curve of the good strategists, the mediocre ones, and the bad ones, right?
And the good creatives were going to say, okay, this brief sucks, and I want to see a better brief. Let's work on it. And you're going to go back to the beginning.
But I think there's value in saying, and Howard does his workshops a lot with clients that are writing briefs for their in-house agencies, etc., or even for their freelancers or out-of-house agencies. But it's the client writing the brief, and that is that their identity isn't as wrapped up in brief writing as a strategist at an agency's is, right? So for us as agency strategists, the creative brief is like the most visible piece of work that we do. It's kind of emblematic. It's not by any means the only thing we do, but it is kind of that thing that's up there. So we take this great pride in it. If you're a client that's, a marketing client that's doing a gazillion things, your identity isn't wrapped up in brief writing. And for you, unless you really decide I need to be better, it's easy to fill out a brief as if it were just a form that you're filling out for the government or whatever. Like, let me get through this so that I could go to the next step, which is to deliver this document to the people that are going to do the work so that then they can do the next step. And so it takes a little bit of self-awareness to say, no, this is important. It's not a form that needs to be filled out. It's a thought process that's going to lead us to a premise on which other people's creativity is going to be unleashed. And I think that's the point is, if you take it seriously, then it sounds like a webinar like yours could be very, very useful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people assume the brief, like the template is the answer. Like you see so many people passing around Google Drive folders with a gazillion different like brief templates, and agencies like agonize over like what are the boxes. And I don't think this is a template problem. This is like a process problem. Like how do you actually give
yourself a thinking
enough
problem?
Yeah,
it's a thinking problem. Yeah. In the time frame. I'm going to open up Pandora's box here for you, Dan. Do you encourage, or does your training include using AI?
It does not mention it at all. And I don't have an aversion to it, and I use AI all the time, but I think what I wanted to do was provide people a way, to your point, Howard, like how to think about the steps that you go through and the questions you need to answer for a brief without using AI. You can go ahead and I can bang out a brief in 25 seconds if you put in the right prompt into ChatGPT. But in terms of like getting the space to really think about the craft of brief writing, I wanted to focus it on what's in here and like how you structure your thinking. The other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to design this process to include primary research. And that was really important to me, that I didn't want it just to be based on what you can find in ChatGPT or through Google search. I wanted to figure out, like, is it even possible to do primary research in 8 hours? So we include tools in there, for, a quick turn survey, even qualitative research. How do you do that within the 8 hours? And I think that adds to the overall process and the quality of the work coming on the back end.
Have you done this long enough for you to determine whether or not this condensed process has actually made you a better brief writer, whether you have 8 hours or not?
Yeah, for sure. I think the interesting thing when you think about the time constraints that people have to write briefs, it really is the essence of strategy, right? Strategy is all about working within constraints and like figuring out how do you get the outcome that you want given the constraints that you have. So sometimes like artificially imposing constraints on yourself actually makes you sharper, makes you more focused and more effective. So yeah, there's definitely, even when I have more than 8 hours to write a brief, I'm still using a lot of these tools that I had to create in this artificial constraint that I was putting together.
I like to call this, I mean, I've done this many times before. I've referred to this concept of liberating constraint. That's what a brief is. You put these walls in place that creatives can bounce against. Without those walls, I'm going to flounder. You establish that box that I have to operate in. And there's a similar kind of box that creatives use. We think we are conscious of it when we are engaged in the process of coming up with an idea, but there is a process. It's been articulated by James Webb Young. His book is called A Technique for Producing Ideas. He essentially articulated in 5 points what the brain goes through to figure out an idea. And like I said, when I start to ideate, I don't say, okay, I'm on step 1, and now I'm going to move to step 2. I just do it because it's so ingrained in what I do. But I've also recognized where I am in the sequence, because there's an important point in that sequence where I have to say it's time for me to walk away. My brain is turned into mush, and I need to turn it over to the subconscious part of my brain, and that's when the magic happens. And it's young creatives who refuse to turn it off. They want to be constantly, I'm just going to be an idea machine, and they burn themselves out because they don't recognize the importance of the subconscious mind to do the thing. So there's this process that we follow as creatives, and you have taken this expanded process and compressed it. And to me, it seems like a brilliant way of improving your brief writing skills.
I'd like to step back real quick to the AI discussion.
Yeah.
And say, I really think you're smart and right for keeping your process agnostic of AI, because the point is, if you can do this without the help of AI, then using AI, you can be even better, right? Like you can, there's certain things like, you know, that you put it in, say, hey, how can I say this 20% more economical on words? And the AI is going to spit it right back to you. But the thought was yours, right? Like the idea, and you went through it. And then that second opinion almost of refining can help, but it's not necessary. It's a help, and you can maybe take that really nice diamond and cut it even to be even sharper, with the help of tools. I think it's similar with any sort of, if we've talked about like your creative brief, if it's visually attractive, it's also something that creatives key in on, right? Like, is it well designed? Is it, is it something I want to look at? How is this thing written? And AI can help with that, but that's all comes after the hard work of the thinking has been done by a human. And then for sure, there's opportunities to interject AI in some of those steps, but once you kind of understand and are practiced at doing them on your own, I think is the way to do it.
Yeah, and you need room for serendipity, like those shower thoughts or like the conversations in the hallways that just connects what you thought were disconnected ideas, and I think if strategists treat AI like an order taker of like, hey, this is what I need you to do, I don't think we can complain when clients treat us as order takers and say, hey, this is the brief, go ahead and put it into your template and then give it to creatives. Like, we have to appreciate the art and the humanity that's needed to get to really great ideas.
How often do you offer the webinar, Dan?
It's a evergreen course, so it's actually a series of like 8 videos. Each video is about 20 minutes in length. That kind of goes through each step of the process. So yeah, it's anyone can kind of pick it up whenever they want to, come back to different sessions if they want to refresh their memory and things.
Very
cool. So it's what we call asynchronous. It's not live.
Exactly.
Yep. We don't get to talk to you. Is there an opportunity to reach out and have a discussion with you if someone wanted to do that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm always available and happy to have these sorts of conversations. But okay. Yeah, the course is just kind of an entree into it, and just to give people enough to get going and do it on their own. But there's always kind of a deeper set of tools and techniques that aren't included in the course. But like I said, it's all pretty self-contained.
Okay. And go ahead, Henry.
I was going to say, we don't want you to give away any of your IP here, but if you could give us a little teaser, you actually teased like how to get some research in your back pocket in a short amount of time. Could you give us like a hint on something like that to kind of show how this could provide value?
Yeah, exactly. So, Howard, you're talking about like the 5 steps in the creative development process. There's actually 6 steps that I put into this 8-hour creative brief process. So there's prepare, there's point, there's probe, there's ponder, there's prototype, and then package. So I love alliteration. So the prepare is all about, so the prepare is like
a little creative.
Yes. The prepare is taking the first hour of the day and kind of like setting the table and, making sure that you have everything in place, like all the materials, all the tools. But you quickly move from there to what I call like the point part of the process. And that's really like reframing the assignment. So it's like taking the client brief and trying to figure out like what's the business problem that you're trying to solve. And there's a couple of different techniques to help you think about how to reframe it. I talk a lot in this course specifically about reframe, don't reinvent. Like you don't have the time to really like challenge clients' thinking with their original brief, for better or worse. So it's always about taking what they have, making some concessions, and assuming that like their definition of the target audience is accurate, and their the benefits for their product that they want to communicate are the benefits that the customers care about, right? So it's like you got to take some of that stuff as givens, but you still want to try to find a way of like what's an interesting new angle, or like what's a theme that I want to explore through some of the research. So that's really kind of reframing things at the early stages. And then when you move into the probe phase, that's when you can start thinking about like what's some primary research I might want to do. There's a online survey, which for the survey, like the quantitative survey and then the qualitative research, I have like templated questionnaires and discussion guides. So you can do a lot of just kind of find and replace, like slap the brand name in that you're looking at and working on. And there's all sorts of advice on like how do you get respondents to participate in a short term project like this. Different technology and tools that you can use to actually stack qualitative interviews. So rather than doing like one interview after another, how can you do it asynchronously? So anyway, there's all sorts of stuff kind of packed into the research part, and then coming out of it, a lot of different frameworks for thinking about pulling out the insights and turning it into potential strategic directions. So it's a lot, but it just if you kind of go through it in sequence, everything kind of builds on the previous step, and the thinking just gets better and better as you go through each step.
Okay, we will provide a link in to this. If you could send us your link, and we'll include it in the notes for viewers.
Yep.
Do you see this as kind of an end product, or do you see something else emerging out of this from what you've learned so far? What do you think?
I think there's a list of other courses that I've been thinking about, but I haven't figured out how the best way to prioritize them. But I think you could do a full course on each step of the process, really. Like if I wanted to do like a full course on research and insights work and turning observations and insights and that whole sort of process, like that could be something. I think there's another thing that I'm a big believer in is like creative brief prototypes. So I always find it interesting that like strategists expect creatives to come back with like 3 or 4 campaigns and you have conversation around those. But we only give creatives one brief. Like, is there a way you can kind of change the process? So you're actually giving the creative team like, hey, here are 3 different briefs. Like, let's have a conversation. Like, what's resonating with you? What do you think can lead to the best work? So there's just little kind of wrinkles to the traditional process that I've played around with and had success with that I could turn into future courses as well.
Okay. Something to look forward to. Henry and I have, I think once or twice in our 4 years of having the discussion, talked about the possibility of not necessarily having more than one brief, but maybe more than one insight or more than one single-minded proposition on the same brief, so that you could go down different avenues if you wished. But it was just kind of something we talked about. Didn't go anywhere, but it's it's an idea, as if we didn't have enough ideas, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Dan Carlton, the proprietor of the Paragraph Project and the originator of this, I think, fascinating and valuable training on how to write a creative brief when you have only 8 hours. Thank you for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers. This has been fascinating.
I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.